I walked into my college friend's wedding reception in my carefully chosen suit, a hefty gift envelope in my pocket. The moment I entered the banquet hall, I saw my wife, Lydia, who was supposed to be on a business trip in France. She was leaning intimately against the best man, David, doting on him as they made their rounds, toasting each table. Today was my college friend Lindsay's wedding. The red carpet at the entrance of the Beaumont Hotel stretched from the curb all the way into the main lobby. An archway made of pink balloons was almost blinding, and you could hear the sounds of laughter from a block away. I straightened my tie and headed inside, still thinking about how I'd tease Lindsay later, telling her to hurry up and have a chubby baby boy. But just as I rounded the guest check-in, the MC's voice hit my ears like a thunderclap. Let's give a warm round of applause for our best man, Mr. David, and his close friend, Ms. Lydia, as they come around for a toast. Lydia. The moment I heard her name, I froze. The envelope in my hand nearly slipped to the floor. I followed everyone's gaze toward the side aisle next to the stage. The woman in the custom-tailored gray women's suit, her long hair pinned up immaculately. Wasn't that my wife, Lydia? Just last night, she was nestled in my arms, her head on my chest, murmuring softly, "Bode, I have to fly to France for work tomorrow. I'll be gone for 2 weeks. Don't just order takeout all the time, and remember to get to bed on time. I'll bring you back the new Patek Philippe watch when I get home." Bode is what she always called me. I'd heard it for 5 years. It used to sound sweet. Now it just made me sick. She was whispering my name 1 minute and then throwing her arm around another man the next, even lying to me about a business trip. But here she was, not on a plane to France, but at someone else's wedding, protectively cradling David in her arms as his close friend. I recognized that guy, David. He was a new intern at Lydia's company. She'd even brought him home last month, saying he was a fresh graduate who didn't know the ropes, and she wanted to introduce him so she could look out for him at work. Thinking back on it now, I must have been blind not to see the disgusting way they looked at each other. David was wearing a slim, fit white tuxedo, a cocky smile on his face. And Lydia? The smile on her face was stretched practically ear to ear. As she clinked glasses with the guests, her other hand never left David's arm. Anyone who didn't know better would have thought they were the newlyweds. "Aren't Lydia and David a perfect match?" A girl at the next table whispered. "I saw them shopping for watches together the other day. I bet we'll be at their wedding next, right? Lydia is so into him. I heard she even paid the security deposit on his apartment." The words stabbed into my ears like needles. I gripped the gift envelope so tightly my knuckles turned white, my nails tearing the paper. A fire ignited in my chest, and I wanted nothing more than to storm over there and smash their wine glasses in their faces. But I took a deep breath. Couldn't. Making a scene at Lindsay's wedding wouldn't just humiliate me, it would ruin her big day. Those two cheaters weren't worth it. I didn't take another step forward or say hello to anyone. I turned and walked straight back toward the entrance. With every step my dress shoes took on the carpet, it felt like I was walking on broken glass, the pain tightening in my chest. As I passed the reception desk, Lindsay was shaking hands with a guest. When she saw me leaving, she rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Bode, you just got here. Why are you leaving? Are you not feeling well?" I forced a smile and stuffed the envelope into her hand. "Something urgent came up at home. Congratulations on your wedding, and I hope you start a family soon." I didn't dare stay a second longer, afraid I'd lose control of my emotions. It wasn't sadness. It was rage. Rage at myself for being so blind as to marry Lydia in the first place. The moment I stepped out of the hotel, a cold wind hit me, and I realized my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I pulled out my phone and opened my chat with Lydia. The last message was from her this morning. "Bode, I'm at the airport, gate C12. Wait for me to come home." It was followed by a heart emoji. Reading that blatant lie, I let out a cold laugh, long pressed her name, and blocked her. I blocked her phone number, too. I didn't want to hear a single word from her. The priority now was to lock down what was rightfully mine. I got into the driver's seat and slammed the door. My knuckles still ached from clenching the envelope, but my grip on the steering wheel grew steadier. In the rearview mirror, the pink balloons of the Beaumont Hotel were still swaying in the wind. Lydia and David's figures occasionally flashed past the entrance. The image was like a thorn in my eye, but I didn't look back a second time. This wasn't the time for emotions. I had to secure what was mine, and fast. My phone buzzed in my bag. I pulled it out and saw Lydia's message from this morning. Bode. I'm at the airport, still pinned at the top of my texts. I stared at the words and sneered, then swiped across the screen and dragged her number into my block list. If I was going to make a clean break, it had to be clean. No more chances for her to sweet-talk me. Next, I opened my contacts and found the name Mr. Lee, attorney. My best friend, Jax, had recommended him when he got divorced last year. He said Mr. Lee was the sharpest when it came to dividing marital assets, able to uncover even the secret stashes the other party tried to hide. I'd saved the number on a whim, never thinking I'd actually need it. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a calm, professional male voice answered. Hello, who is this? Mr. Lee, hello. I'm a friend of Jax's. He mentioned me to you before. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't hide the urgency. I have an emergency. I need you to immediately freeze all community property assets between me and my wife, Lydia. The sooner, the better. Mr. Lee paused for 2 seconds, not asking about personal drama, and focused solely on the task. Okay, don't panic. Can you tell me specifically which assets you need to freeze? Bank accounts, investments, stocks, and real estate. I need a list to start the emergency process. I leaned back against the seat, my mind racing as I mentally inventoried our assets. There are 3 bank accounts, all in Lydia's name, but the money was all saved after we got married. I'll text you the account numbers. There's also a $75,000 investment with Chase that matures tomorrow. That has to be frozen first. I'm afraid she'll transfer it out. The stock account is under her control with about $50,000 in it. That needs to be locked too. We also have 2 properties, a condo at the Riverside Gardens and a villa in the Aspen Hills suburbs. The deeds are in both our names. But last month, Lydia said she needed the deeds to help a friend with a loan. I didn't give them to her. Can you also make sure she doesn't try to secretly mortgage them? As I mentioned the deeds, my heart sank even further. So she'd already started planning to go after our property back then. I was lucky I had a gut feeling and held on, or I'd be losing the houses right now. Mr. Lee was taking notes on the other end, his voice clear. Rest assured, I'll contact the banks and the brokerage firm immediately. The liquid assets will be frozen by the end of today. As for the properties, I'll first check the county records for any liens and then prepare an asset preservation order for you. But you need to send me the bank account numbers and investment details as soon as possible, along with any documents proving they are community property, like post-marital pay stubs and investment purchase records. I have all of that, I said immediately. I saved our post-marital financial records to a cloud drive, and I have the investment contracts. I'll send them to you right now. Also, Mr. Lee, Lydia cheated on me. I'm definitely going to file for divorce, and I'll need your help with that too. No problem. Send the documents over first. I'll prioritize the asset freeze and notify you as soon as there's any progress, Mr. Lee said. He paused, then added, during this time, try to avoid any direct confrontation with Lydia. Don't let her suspect anything, or she might do something desperate and try to move the assets. After hanging up, I quickly opened my cloud drive, packaged the financial records and account information, and sent them to Mr. Lee. When the sent notification popped up, I finally let out a breath of relief. Leaning back in my seat, I watched the endless stream of traffic outside, the panic in my heart finally starting to subside. I used to think that couples didn't need to be so nitpicky about money, so I let her manage all our finances. Only now did I understand. You always have to keep control in your own hands, or you'll get sold out without even knowing it. I started the car but didn't drive home. Instead, I headed toward my best friend Jax's place. I couldn't go back to that house full of lies, and I couldn't let Lydia find me. Just as I got on the freeway, a text from Mr. Lee came through. Bank accounts and stocks have been frozen. I've spoken with the bank about the investment. It will be frozen upon maturity and cannot be transferred. I checked the properties, no liens. I've already submitted the preservation order, which should be approved by tomorrow. Reading the message, I couldn't help but grip my phone tighter, a small smile finally appearing on my face. Lydia, you love to put on a show, don't you? You love your little schemes? Let's see if you can still smile tomorrow when you try to use that money. The car exited the freeway, and I could see the streetlights of Jax's neighborhood in the distance. I felt a little more grounded and put my phone on silent. I took a deep breath. Now it was time to wait for Lydia's reaction. All I had to do was watch as she walked step by step into the trap I had set. By the time Lydia and David saw off the last of the wedding guests, the sky was already dark. The red lanterns at the hotel entrance lit up, reflecting the flush that still lingered on David's cheeks. He held Lydia's hand, his voice magnetic. Lydia, thank you for today. If you hadn't been here to back me up, my relatives would have been grilling me about my girlfriend all night. Lydia squeezed his hand, her heart fluttering, though she tried to sound composed. Don't be silly. You're just a young guy fresh out of college. It's natural to be overwhelmed planning a wedding. It was my pleasure to help out. As she spoke, her phone in her pocket jabbed her, and she remembered that she still hadn't gotten a reply to the text she'd sent Bode that morning. Normally, Bode would be home by now, waiting for her call to know she'd arrived safely. Lydia pulled out her phone, unlocked it, and tapped on her chat with Bode, intending to send a follow-up. Just finished up, heading back to the hotel. But the moment her finger hit send, a red exclamation mark popped up with a line of text below it. Message failed. This person is not your friend or has blocked you. Blocked? Lydia frowned and held the phone further away, making sure she hadn't tapped the wrong chat. What was going on? Why would he block me out of the blue? She thought it might be a glitch, so she closed the app and reopened it, but the same red exclamation mark appeared. David leaned over to look, a hint of confusion in his eyes. What's wrong, Lydia? Who blocked you? Was it Bode? Lydia quickly shoved her phone back into her pocket and forced a smile. It's nothing. Bode's phone is probably acting up. He's usually not like this. She felt a knot of panic in her stomach but refused to believe Bode could have found out anything. After all, she had just flown to France that morning, and only close friends were invited to the wedding. No one knew about her and David, so how could Bode have suddenly blocked her? Unconvinced, she pulled out her phone again and scrolled to Jax's number. Jax was Bode's best friend, his brother since childhood. Bode told Jax everything. Maybe she could find out where Bode was from him. She dialed the number. After several rings, Jax finally answered, his voice sharp. Lydia, what do you want? Hearing the hostility in his tone, Lydia quickly softened her voice. Jax, are you with Bode? I can't reach him. He blocked me on the app, and his phone won't go through. Do you know where he is? Jax let out a cold laugh on the other end, his voice rising. Lydia, you have the nerve to ask where Bode is? Don't you know what kind of messed up things you've been doing? Lydia's heart dropped. What have I done? I just went to France for a business trip. That's all. Jax, stop being cryptic. I really can't find Bode, and I'm worried something happened to him. Worried about him? You should be worried about yourself. Jax's voice was dripping with sarcasm. Lydia, stop with the fake act. Jax hung up with a sharp click. Lydia stood there holding her phone, Jax's words echoing in her ears. Her palms were instantly slick with sweat. What did Jax mean by that? Did Bode know? Couldn't be. She hadn't run into Bode all day, and no one at the wedding would have let it slip. How could he possibly know? David tugged her arm, a note of anxiety in his voice. Lydia, why was Jax being so harsh? Did you and Bode have a fight? Lydia shook her head, forcing herself to stay calm. No, we didn't fight. He must have misunderstood something. I'll clear it up with him later. She didn't have the energy to deal with David right now. Her mind was consumed with finding Bode. Bode was never one to be unreasonable. For him to suddenly block her and disappear meant something was seriously wrong. She took out her phone again, trying to find the numbers of Bode's colleagues, but she could only remember a few of his managers. Bode rarely talked about work with her, so she had no way of contacting anyone. Lydia clenched her jaw and decided to go home first. David, I'm gonna drop you off. I need to go home and see if Bode's there. David looked a little disappointed but didn't argue. He just nodded. Text me when you get home. Lydia dropped David off at his rental and then sped toward the Riverside Gardens. Along the way, she kept dialing Bode's number, but each time, she was met with the same robotic female voice. The user you have dialed has blocked your number. Please try again later. The more she dialed, the more frantic she became, her hands barely steady on the steering wheel. 40 minutes later, Lydia parked downstairs at the Riverside Gardens. She rushed into the elevator, pressed the button for the 18th floor, and pulled out her key. The door clicked open. The living room was dark. The lights were off, and the familiar smell of dinner wasn't there. Bode wasn't home. She turned on the living room light and scanned the room. The throw pillows were still on the sofa, and the book Bode was reading yesterday was on the coffee table. But in the shoe cabinet by the door, the pair of brown leather shoes he always wore was gone. She walked into the bedroom. The closet door was ajar. Several of Bode's everyday outfits and his suitcase were missing. His laptop and most of his files were gone from the desk, leaving only a few knickknacks he rarely used. Lydia went to the nightstand, opened the drawer, and saw their marriage certificate. But he was gone. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her mind a complete mess. Where did Bode go? Why did he pack his things and leave? And what did Jax mean by messed up things? Just then, her phone vibrated. It was a text from David. Hey, are you home yet? Did you find Bode? Lydia stared at the message, her finger hovering over the screen. Took her a long time to reply. Not yet. He probably went to a friend's house. I'll look for him tomorrow. You should get some rest. Don't worry. She didn't want David to know too much. She was afraid he'd overthink things, and even more afraid that things were about to blow up. Putting her phone down, Lydia sat in the empty living room and lit a cigarette. As the smoke swirled around her, the panic in her heart grew. She suddenly remembered that when Bode had looked at her that morning, his gaze had seemed a little different. She hadn't paid it any mind at the time, but now it was hitting her. Had Bode already found out? Was he not at home today because he went to the wedding? The thought sent a layer of cold sweat down her back. She stubbed out the cigarette, stood up, and paced back and forth in the living room. There was nothing she could do but hope that Bode would contact her tomorrow. But she had no idea that what awaited her was far worse than just a missing husband. Lydia stayed curled up on the sofa until dawn, still wearing yesterday's jacket. Her phone screen lit up and dimmed repeatedly with messages from David. The last one had arrived half an hour ago. Lydia, I'm waiting for you at the mall entrance. The watch store isn't busy today, so let's get there early. She sat up, rubbing her throbbing temples. Her mind was still a chaotic mess. Where on earth was Bode? What did Jax mean? But the thought of David waiting to buy his watch pushed the panic down. Bode would come back once he cooled off anyway. It was more important to keep David happy and stop him from throwing another tantrum. Lydia got up to wash her face. She smoothed out her wrinkled blouse in the mirror, sprayed on some perfume, and pinned her messy hair back. Seeing her relatively presentable reflection, she felt a little more at ease. There was no way Lydia would let things fall apart. When Bode came back, she'd just make up an excuse, buy him some new gadget he liked, and he'd be fine. Before leaving, she felt the Bank of America card in her wallet, and a small smile touched her lips. It held the $20,000 bonus she'd received last month. Taking out $3,000 for the watch would be perfect. Humming a tune, she went downstairs, got in her car, and drove toward the downtown bank, already planning to take David out for his favorite sushi after buying the watch. The bank had only been open for half an hour, so it wasn't crowded. Lydia pushed open the door, walked straight to a teller, and placed her card on the counter. Her tone as casual as if she were buying a bottle of water. Hi, I'd like to withdraw $3,000 in cash, and can you check the balance for me? The teller smiled up at her, took the card, swiped it through the machine, and typed a few keys. Suddenly, the smile on his face froze. He double-checked the screen before looking back up at Lydia. his voice so quiet it was as if he was afraid of startling her. "Ma'am, the balance on this card is 1 cent. "What?" Lydia thought she'd misheard. She leaned closer, her eyes fixed on the screen behind the teller. "Say that again? How much?" 1 cent. "Are you sure you have the right card? I just deposited a $20,000 bonus into this account last month. How could there only be a penny left?" The teller turned the monitor toward her and pointed at the number. "Ma'am, as you can see, the balance is indeed 0.01. There's no mistake. Perhaps you had a large recent expenditure that you forgot about? A transfer or a purchase? A large expenditure? I've barely spent any money this past month." Lydia's voice shot up an octave, startling an older woman in line behind her.
Impossible.
"It must be a problem with your bank system. Check it again on another machine. I'm telling you, if my money is missing, your bank is going to pay for it." The commotion drew the attention of everyone nearby. People turned to look, and some even started discreetly filming with their phones. The teller didn't argue. He patiently took her card to another machine and swiped it again. When the screen lit up, he turned it back to her. "Ma'am, it really is 0.01. Are you sure a family member didn't use your card? Your husband, perhaps? A family member?" A buzz went through Lydia's head, and the first person who came to mind was Bode. But she had set up this account secretly, and the PIN was her birthday. How would Bode know? Even if he was angry, he wouldn't withdraw all the money. Her hands fumbled as she pulled another card from her wallet, a Chase card. This was their joint account with over 30,000 in it. That couldn't be gone, too. She slapped the card on the counter, her hand trembling. "Then check this one. This is my joint account with my husband. There's over 30,000 in it. Check it." The teller took the card. After a few keystrokes, he looked up with a hint of pity in his eyes. "Ma'am, the balance on this card is also 1 cent. Impossible."
Absolutely impossible.
Lydia snatched the card back, her fingers turning white as she gripped it. She frantically rummaged through her wallet for her last card, a Wells Fargo account where she'd hidden an 8,000 slush fund as a safety net. And this one. Check this one. If this one also has only a penny left, I'm not done with you people. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder. Someone whispered, "Looks like her husband must have cleaned out the accounts. Maybe she got caught cheating and that's why he did it." The words floated into Lydia's ears, and her face flushed red, then pale. But she was too desperate to care about the humiliation, her eyes fixed on the teller's hands. The result was the same. The balance on the third card was also 0.01. Lydia stood frozen, her mind a complete blank. 3 cards, totaling nearly 70,000. How could it all be gone overnight, leaving her with just 3 cents? She clutched the cards, her knuckles turning blue. She suddenly remembered what Jax had said about her messed up things, and Bode packing his bags and disappearing. A terrifying thought surfaced. Was this Bode's doing? She scrambled for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it, and dialed the bank's customer service line. The moment the call connected, she screamed into the receiver. "What is wrong with your bank? All the money in my 3 accounts is gone. Over $70,000. And now there's only a penny left. Is there a problem with your system? You better look into this right now, or I'm filing a complaint." The customer service representative was silent for a few seconds before responding in a formulaic tone. "Ma'am, after checking our records, it appears that the 3 bank accounts under your name, as well as any associated investment accounts, were legally frozen by a court order yesterday at 3:05 p.m. The reason for the freeze was a community property preservation request. If you require further details, you may contact your spouse or the issuing court." A court freeze? Community property preservation? Lydia's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking from top to bottom, just like her mind, completely shattered. She bent down to pick it up, the cold floor against her fingertips finally bringing her back to reality. It was Bode. Bode had requested the freeze. He hadn't just blocked her and packed his bags. He had gone straight to the courts and frozen all their assets. The people around her were still staring, pointing, and whispering. Their gazes felt like needles piercing her skin. Lydia picked up her phone and suddenly felt her legs go weak, nearly collapsing to the floor. She steadied herself against the counter, looking at the 3 useless bank cards in her hand, feeling a mix of rage and panic. How dare Bode do this? Half of that money was hers. What right did he have to freeze it all? But panicking was useless. Her phone screen was black, unable to make calls. Her bank cards were empty, unable to withdraw a single cent. Bode was nowhere to be found, and Jax wouldn't answer her calls. She stood in the middle of the bank lobby in her wrinkled blouse, clutching 3 worthless pieces of plastic, surrounded by judging eyes. In her 30-something years of life, she had never felt so utterly humiliated. Lydia stood in the bank lobby clutching the 3 empty cards, feeling as if all the blood had been drained from her body. She didn't even have the strength to lift her feet. The stares of the people around her felt like daggers in her back. The whispers, she must have cheated, and her husband froze her accounts, and she looked so put together. I can't believe she'd do something so sleazy, made her ears burn. She wished the ground would swallow her whole. She scrambled to pick up her cracked phone, wiped the dust off the screen, and frantically scrolled through her contacts, finally stopping on the name Mr. Lee, attorney. She remembered Bode mentioning that Jax's divorce lawyer was a Mr. Lee. Bode must have gone to him to freeze the assets. Like a drowning woman grasping at a straw, Lydia dialed his number, her hands still trembling. The phone rang 5 times before he picked up. Mr. Lee's calm voice came through. "Hello, who is this?" "Mr. Lee, it's Lydia, Bode Miller's wife." Lydia's voice was laced with tears, a mix of panic and urgency. "You need to tell Bode to unfreeze my assets. That money is our community property. On what grounds can he just freeze it all? You need to contact him right now and tell him to stop this nonsense." Mr. Lee was silent for 2 seconds, his tone as calm as if he were discussing a stranger's affairs. "Ms. Miller, the asset freeze was a legal request made by Mr. Miller. I am simply acting on my client's instructions. If you wish to resolve this, I suggest you communicate directly with Mr. Miller. It would be inappropriate for me to interfere with my client's decisions." "I can't reach him. He blocked me," Lydia yelled, drawing the attention of a nearby security guard. "Mr. Lee, I'm begging you. Please just help me arrange a meeting with him. I need to talk to him. I'll agree to whatever he wants, as long as he unfreezes the assets." There was another pause on the other end. Then Mr. Lee's voice returned. "I can pass on your request, but whether Mr. Miller agrees to meet is up to him. Please wait for news by the bank's entrance. I will contact you with an update." After hanging up, Lydia slumped onto the steps outside the bank like a homeless person. People came and went, but no one paid her any mind. It was only then that she realized, without money, she was nothing. About half an hour later, Mr. Lee called back. He said Bode had agreed to meet at 2 p.m. at a cafe called Serendipity. Lydia jumped to her feet, dusted off her pants, and tried to smooth out her wrinkled blouse. She wanted to take a taxi to the cafe, but after checking all her pockets, she only found $3.50. Her only option was to run there. The October wind was already chilly. She ran until she was sweating, arriving at the cafe with her hair plastered to her forehead, looking utterly disheveled. She got there 10 minutes early and chose a table by the window, her heart pounding in her chest. She rehearsed her lines over and over in her head. She would apologize to Bode first, tell him her thing with David was a momentary lapse in judgment, and promise never to do it again. That would surely convince him to unfreeze the assets. At exactly 2 o'clock, the cafe door opened, and Bode walked in. He was wearing a black trench coat. His hair was neatly combed, and his face was expressionless. His eyes were as cold as ice, a stark contrast to Lydia's pathetic state. Lydia quickly stood up and tried to take his hand, but Bode stepped back, avoiding her touch. Her hand froze in mid-air. She gave an awkward laugh. "Bode, you're here. Have a seat. What would you like to drink?" "I'll go order." "No thanks. I'm not in the mood for coffee." Bode cut her off, sitting down across from her and placing a tablet on the table. "Let's get straight to the point. I don't have much time." Seeing his cold attitude, Lydia's own anger flared up, and her tone hardened. Bode, what exactly are you trying to do? Why did you freeze my assets? We saved that money together. What right do you have to freeze it without even talking to me? I can't even pay my clients now. Do you have any idea how much you're ruining me? She grew more agitated as she spoke, her voice rising and drawing stares from nearby tables. But Bode didn't get angry. He simply picked up the tablet, unlocked it, and pushed it in front of Lydia. Take a look at this before you talk to me about being ruined. Lydia looked down and saw the tablet screen filled with her text conversations with David. Babe, once I divorce Bode, I'll buy you that huge downtown condo. I told him I was going to France for work, but I really just wanted to be with you at the wedding. Each message was more damning than the last. Lydia's face went white, and she fumbled to close the tablet, but Bode's hand held it in place. Don't be in such a hurry. There's more. Bode swiped the screen, revealing a gallery of intimate photos of her and David. There were pictures of them hugging outside a hotel, feeding each other in a restaurant, and one of her in yesterday's gray suit, arm in arm with David in his groomsman attire, making a heart shape with their hands backstage at the wedding. In the background, you could even see balloons that spelled out congratulations. I took these photos myself yesterday at Lindsay's wedding. Bode's voice was flat, but his words pierced Lydia's heart like icicles. Lydia, didn't you say you were on a business trip to France? How did you end up at Lindsay's wedding, making heart signs with him? Why don't you explain that to me? Lydia's lips trembled. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. She never imagined Bode had not only been at the wedding but had also gathered so much evidence. She opened her mouth, finally managing to stammer, Bode, David and I are just friends. Those photos are a misunderstanding. He forced me to send those texts. A misunderstanding? Bode sneered, swiping to another screen on the tablet, this one showing the transaction history of the secret Bank of America account she'd opened. Then what about this card you opened behind my back? Is the $20,000 bonus in it also a misunderstanding? What about you telling David you were about to go buy him a watch? Was that a misunderstanding, too? Lydia's face turned beet red, like a cooked shrimp. She thought, the pin for that card was my birthday. How could Bode have known? She suddenly recalled a moment last month when she was entering her pin, and Bode happened to be clearing the table nearby. She hadn't thought anything of it, but now she realized he must have seen it and remembered. Did you think I wouldn't find out about you secretly moving our assets? Bode continued, his voice rising enough for the people around them to hear. You transferred our joint savings to your mother's account and told David that money would all be yours someday. I have proof of everything. Lydia, you cheated on me and tried to run off with all our money. How could you be so disgusting? The other customers had caught on, and they all started pointing and whispering at Lydia. So she's a cheater. Cheating and trying to steal the money, the guy did the right thing. She should be left with nothing. He must have been blind to marry her. Lydia hung her head lower and lower, wishing she could disappear into the floor. She wanted to defend herself, but with the evidence right in front of her, anything she said would be a lie. She looked up, her eyes red and pleading. Bode, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I've already broken things off with David. I'll never see him again. Please just unfreeze the assets and let's go home and be a family again. Okay? I promise I'll be good to you from now on. I'll never lie to you again. Go home? Bode looked at her, his eyes filled with contempt. When you were all over David at the wedding, did you think about home? When you were planning your future with him, did you think about our home? Now that you're broke, you want to come home to me? Lydia, it's too late. With that, Bode picked up his tablet and bag, stood up, and walked out of the cafe. Lydia tried to follow him but was stopped by Mr. Lee, who had just arrived. Mr. Lee looked at her, his tone stern. Ms. Miller, Mr. Miller has made himself perfectly clear. If you want to retain any shred of dignity, stop harassing him. Otherwise, the upcoming divorce proceedings will only be more unfavorable for you. Lydia stood frozen, watching Bode's back disappear through the door as the whispers around her continued. She suddenly felt her strength leave her, and she collapsed into her chair, the tears finally starting to fall. Lydia left the cafe and wandered down the street as the autumn wind sent leaves spiraling at her feet. She felt completely drained. The cracked screen of her phone in her hand, Bode's icy stare, the damning text messages on the tablet, and the judgmental looks from the other customers all churned in her mind, making her so agitated she wanted to scream. Just then, her phone vibrated in her pocket. The name David lit up the screen. Seeing his name only made her more annoyed. She couldn't even take care of herself right now, let alone worry about David's watch. But she didn't dare ignore the call, afraid he'd cause a scene and make things even worse. She took a deep breath, answered the phone, and tried to sound normal. "Hello, David." "Lydia, where are you?" David's magnetic voice came through the phone, tinged with impatience. "I've been waiting at the mall entrance for almost an hour. The clerk at the watch store said there's only one of the new models left. If you don't get here soon, someone else is going to buy it." Lydia's heart sank. She stopped walking and quickly made an excuse. "David, I'm so sorry. Something urgent came up at work. A client needed last-minute changes to a proposal, so I can't get away. Can we buy the watch another day?" She huddled by the side of the road as she spoke, terrified a passerby might overhear her desperate situation.
Urgent?
"What's more important than me?" David's voice grew louder, clearly upset. "You promised me yesterday you'd be here today. Why are you backing out now? Do you just not want to buy it for me?" Lydia gripped her phone tighter, her knuckles turning white. "It's not that I don't want to buy it. It's a real emergency. Just be patient, okay? Once I'm done with this, I'll buy you 2 watches, how about that?" All she could do was make empty promises to placate him, but she had no idea how she'd deliver. With her assets frozen, she barely had money for food, let alone a watch. 2? Who cares about 2? I want it today. Lydia, do you even care about me at all? You said you wanted to marry me, buy me a big house, and now you can't even afford one watch? His whining was getting on her nerves, but she was afraid he'd make a scene over the phone. She had to give in. Okay, don't cry. I'm on my way now. Wait for me at the mall entrance and don't wander off." She hung up and looked at the $3.50 in her hand with a bitter laugh. She didn't even have enough money for a taxi. She had to run all the way to the mall. The October wind stung her face, and by the time she arrived, panting and out of breath, her clothes were soaked with sweat and her hair was plastered to her forehead. She looked like a complete mess. David saw her from a distance and frowned as he walked over. "Lydia, what took you so long? And look at you, you're covered in sweat. Did you get into a fight with someone?" he asked, but there was no concern in his eyes, only anticipation for the watch. Lydia wiped the sweat from her face and forced a smile. "No fight. I just ran here because I didn't want to keep you waiting." She couldn't tell him she couldn't afford a taxi, and she definitely couldn't tell him her assets were frozen. David grabbed her arm and pulled her into the mall. "Come on, let's go. I just asked the clerk, and that watch with the diamond chips is still there. It's gorgeous. It'll look so classy on me." He chattered on, his eyes sparkling with desire for the watch. Lydia let him pull her along, a heavy stone sinking in her stomach. When they reached the jewelry counter, a salesperson greeted them warmly. "Sir, the watch you were asking about is still available. Let me get it out for you to try on." David smiled and nodded. "Great, let me see it." The salesperson took the watch from the display case and handed it to David. It was a silver timepiece with a ring of tiny diamonds around the face, glittering under the lights. David immediately put it on his wrist, admiring it in the mirror from every angle before turning to Lydia. "Lydia, what do you think? Does it look good?" Lydia squeezed out a smile. "It looks great. It really suits you." The salesperson chimed in. "Ma'am, your boyfriend looks so handsome in that watch. It's on sale right now for just $2,800. It's a great deal." $2,800. Lydia's stomach dropped, and the color drained from her face. She didn't have a penny to her name. How was she supposed to pay for this? David didn't notice her expression. "Lydia, I'll take this one. Go ahead and pay for it." Lydia's hand tightened around the useless bank card in her pocket, and sweat beaded on her forehead again. "David, this watch, maybe we should pass. It's a little expensive. Let's look at some others." The The smile on David's face vanished. He turned to her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Expensive? Lydia, are you kidding me? You got a $20,000 bonus last month. And you're saying a watch that costs less than $3,000 is expensive? You just don't want to buy it for me, do you? The other salespeople and customers turned to look. Lydia's face burned with humiliation. She grabbed David and pulled him toward a quiet corner of the mall. David, don't make a scene. I need to talk to you. Once they were in the corner, David yanked his arm away, his voice angry. Talk about what? Tell me, why won't you buy me the watch? Have you changed your mind about us? Lydia sighed and lowered her voice. It's not that I don't want to buy it for you. I don't have any money right now. My bank accounts have been frozen. All my assets are locked up. I can't withdraw a single cent. What? David's eyes widened, unable to believe what he was hearing. Frozen? How could they be frozen? Was it Bode? Why would he freeze your assets? It's because he misunderstood things between us, Lydia said, quickly shifting the blame to Bode. He heard about us from somewhere, got angry, and froze everything. There's nothing I can do right now. David frowned, his tone full of resentment. Misunderstood? We are together. What right does he have to freeze your assets? What about our wedding? The house? You promised you'd buy me a huge downtown condo, and now you can't even afford a watch. Were you just lying to me all along? Lydia was speechless. All she could say was, don't worry. Once I work things out with Bode and he unfreezes the assets, we'll have our wedding and buy our house. Okay? Wait. How long do I have to wait? David's voice rose again. I've already waited 6 months for you, Lydia. If you really want to be with me, you need to divorce Bode right now and get your assets back. Otherwise, we're done. Fine, then we're done. Lydia's temper flared. She was already furious, and David's pushing was the last straw. You think I wanted this to happen? Do you even like me? Or do you just like my money? Her outburst stunned David into silence for a moment before he retorted, Lydia, how could you say that to me? With that, David turned and ran off. Lydia started to go after him but stopped. In her current state, what could she even say if she caught up to him? She stood in the corner of the mall, watching David's retreating figure, feeling a mixture of anger and regret. She had thought David genuinely liked her, but it turned out he was only interested in her money. Now Bode was divorcing her, and David had stormed out on her. She was truly alone and had nothing left. Lydia stood in the corner of the mall for nearly half an hour. The autumn wind gusted through the open glass doors, sending a chill down her spine. She felt the useless bank cards in her pocket and looked at the notification on her phone showing that David had blocked her again. It finally sank in that she had nowhere to go. At a dead end, she suddenly remembered she still had several custom gowns and some jewelry in the Riverside Gardens condo. Even without cash, she could sell those things for some living expenses. She gritted her teeth, found a friend who lived nearby, and borrowed $200 and their electric scooter, then hurried toward the condo. The scooter ride was bumpy, and the wind whipped at her face, making it sting. When she arrived at the entrance to the Riverside Gardens, she parked the scooter on the side of the road and ran toward the building. But just as she reached the entrance, she saw a white notice posted on the wall next to the main door. The words seizure notice were printed in bold red and black, with the official red seal of the court stamped at the bottom. Lydia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She rushed forward, her trembling fingers tracing the words on the notice. In the matter of asset preservation between the petitioner, Bode Miller, and the respondent, Lydia Miller, and in accordance with Article 104 of the Civil Procedure Law, the property located at 1801 Riverside Gardens is hereby seized. During the seizure period, any sale, mortgage, lease, or use of the property is prohibited. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Seized? Lydia's voice trembled as she repeated Bode's name over and over. How dare he? I own half of this condo. How can he get it seized on his own? Furious, she reached out to tear the notice down, but was stopped by a building security guard on patrol. Ma'am, what are you doing? That's a court-ordered seizure notice. You can't tear it down. I'm the owner of this unit. Lydia yelled, her eyes red as she pushed the guard away. This is my home. I can tear it down if I want to. The guard quickly restrained her and pulled a photocopy from his pocket. Ma'am, look, this is the assistance of execution notice the court gave us. It clearly states that no one is allowed to enter during the seizure period, and the notice cannot be damaged. If you don't believe me, you can call the court to verify. Lydia snatched the paper. The content was identical to the notice, right down to the court's contact information. She stared at the words, her fingers gripping the paper so tightly the edges crumpled. She knew this time she really couldn't go back. What about my things? Lydia's voice softened, a pleading tone creeping in. I have some gowns and jewelry inside. They're very important to me. Can you just let me in to get them? Just for a few minutes. I'll be right out. The guard shook his head, his tone apologetic but firm. Ma'am, it's not that we don't want to help, but the court has rules. No one can go in. If it's really an emergency, you'll have to contact the person who filed the seizure and have them petition the court. Lydia's heart sank. Contact Bode? He had her blocked completely. He would never help her. She suddenly remembered the villa in Aspen Hills. She and Bode had bought it last year for their retirement. They rarely went there. Maybe it hadn't been seized yet. The thought ignited a flicker of hope. She threw the paper on the ground, turned, and ran back to the scooter. It was over an hour's ride to the suburbs. Lydia drove as fast as she could, the cold wind catching in her throat and making her cough. All the way there, she kept telling herself that the villa was so remote Bode must have forgotten about it. Even if he hadn't, the court couldn't have seized it that quickly. If she could just get her things from inside, she could sell them for enough money to get by. But when she arrived at the entrance to the Aspen Hills community, her last sliver of hope was extinguished. The villa's iron gate not only had the same seizure notice as the condo, but it was also secured with a silver seal lock, the words municipal court clearly visible on it. Lydia got off the scooter and stumbled toward the gate, grabbing the bars and shaking them violently. Open up. I'm the owner. Let me in. A security guard heard the commotion and came out of the guardhouse. Ma'am, please stop shaking the gate. This property has been seized by the court. You can't go in. Why? Lydia screamed, tears welling in her eyes. The condo is seized, the villa is seized. What is Bode trying to do? Is he trying to kill me? The guard sighed. Ma'am, we're just following orders. Don't take your anger out on us. Maybe you should try contacting your husband or the court. Lydia pulled out her phone and shakily dialed Mr. Lee's number. The phone rang for a long time before he answered, his voice as calm as ever. Ms. Miller, can I help you? Mr. Lee, did Bode have you file for the seizure of the villa? Lydia's voice was choked with sobs. That house is our joint property. How can he just have it seized? Tell him to undo it, or I'm not done with him. Mr. Lee's tone remained unchanged. Ms. Miller, the request to seize the properties at Riverside Gardens and Aspen Hills was indeed filed by Mr. Miller, and all procedures were followed in accordance with the law. According to the Civil Code, during a marriage, if one party engages in actions that seriously harm the interests of community property, such as hiding, transferring, selling, or destroying assets, the other party has the right to request a division of property and apply for preservation. You cheated during the marriage and attempted to transfer funds. Mr. Miller's request was completely legal. I didn't transfer funds, Lydia retorted, but her voice lacked conviction. The Secret Bank of America account you opened, as well as the $80,000 you attempted to transfer to your mother, serve as evidence, Mr. Lee stated coolly. Furthermore, I must remind you not to attempt to break the seal or force entry during the seizure period. Doing so constitutes obstruction of civil proceedings, which can result in fines or even detention. I suggest you consider the consequences carefully. Lydia clutched her phone, speechless. She knew Mr. Lee was telling the truth. No matter how much she protested now, she couldn't change the fact that the houses were seized. After hanging up, she leaned against the iron gate, staring at the shuttered windows of the villa, and suddenly felt the world spin. She remembered when she and Bode were renovating the villa. He had smiled and said he wanted to plant the yard full of roses, and she had taken his hand and told him she'd love whatever he chose. Now, those beautiful memories were just a bitter irony. At that very moment, Bode was in his office, talking to Mr. Lee on the phone. Mr. Lee, is the seizure paperwork for both properties complete? Bode's voice was steady, betraying no emotion. It's all done. The court has sent assistance of execution notices to both property management offices. Lydia won't be able to get in, Mr. Lee confirmed. I also checked, and there are no liens on either property, so the division process should be straightforward. Good. Bode took a sip of warm water from his desk. I want her to know that the price of betraying me isn't just being broke. It's having nowhere to live. I want to cut off all her escape routes. Mr. Miller, rest assured, as long as she doesn't cause any more trouble, the divorce and property division will proceed smoothly, Mr. Lee said, then added, however, she might be desperate now and could try to find you. I know, Bode said, his eyes fixed on his computer. All I want now is to get this divorce over with and start a new life. After hanging up, Bode opened his laptop and got back to work. He didn't have time to dwell on the pain of the past. He knew that the only way to truly escape the damage Lydia had caused was to move forward. Meanwhile, Lydia was still shivering in the cold wind outside the villa. She scrolled through her phone's contact list but couldn't find a single person who could help her. She finally understood. She had single-handedly destroyed her marriage and her life. The fact that she now had nothing was exactly what she deserved. Lydia huddled in the cold wind outside the villa until the middle of the night. Her lips turned purple from the cold, and when she couldn't take it anymore, she rode the borrowed scooter back toward the city. She couldn't bring herself to go to a friend's house. She had always put on a generous front with them. Showing up now, in this pathetic state, was too humiliating. In the end, she spent half the night curled up in a 24-hour internet cafe. The mix of cigarette smoke and instant noodle fumes was so overwhelming she couldn't sleep. Her clothes were covered in dust and wrinkled like a dish rag. As soon as dawn broke, she left. She only had $150 left from the money her friend had lent her, after paying $50 for the internet cafe. She washed her face in a public restroom and stared at her reflection in the mirror, hair disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. A bitter taste filled her mouth. She, Lydia, had never stepped out looking anything less than glamorous. Now, she had become the very person she used to look down on. She took out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, her finger once again stopping on Bode's name. Even though she knew he had blocked her, begging Bode was the only option she could think of. She remembered that Bode's office was in the Sterling Tower and that he arrived at 9 every morning. She decided to wait for him downstairs. If she could just get Bode to soften up, even enough to unfreeze a few $1,000s so she could eat and rent a room, that would be enough. Lydia returned the scooter to her friend and, with the remaining $150 in her pocket, started walking toward the Sterling Tower. It was a 2.5-mile walk from the internet cafe. It took her over an hour, and by the time she arrived, it was 8:45 a.m. The sidewalks were already bustling with people heading to work. She hid behind a planter near the entrance, trying to stay in the shadows to avoid being recognized. At 8:58, a black car pulled up, and Bode got out of the passenger side. He was dressed in a sharp, dark gray business suit, his hair impeccably styled. His expression was calm as he carried a sleek briefcase. Compared to the other office workers, he looked exceptionally polished and professional. Lydia's heart leaped into her throat. She took a deep breath and rushed forward. She stopped a few feet away from him, her voice choked with tears. "Bode, wait!" Bode heard her and stopped. When he turned and saw it was Lydia, his brow furrowed in disgust. "Lydia, what are you doing here? Didn't I tell you not to bother me again?" Several office workers had noticed the commotion and slowed down to watch. Lydia didn't care about the embarrassment. She took a step closer, reaching for his hand, but he recoiled, avoiding her touch. Her hand froze awkwardly in mid-air. She pulled it back, her voice even quieter. "Bode, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please just forgive me this one time. Okay? Forgive you?" Bode sneered, his voice icy. "Forgive you for what? For lying about a business trip to France while you were off at a wedding with David? For secretly moving our community property to buy him watches and houses? Or for treating me like an idiot and lying to me for so long? Lydia's face flushed crimson, and she hung her head lower. I've already broken things off with David. I have really. I'll never see him again. Can we just go home? Go back to how things were. I promise I'll never do it again. Go home? Bode glanced at the onlookers, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Which home? The Riverside Gardens condo is seized. The Aspen Hills villa is seized. Do you want me to go back to the internet cafe with you? Or maybe under a bridge? Lydia, when you were getting cozy with David, did you ever stop to think this day would come? The murmurs from the crowd grew louder. Someone took out their phone to take a picture. Another person whispered, "This woman is shameless. Cheating and then begging for forgiveness. Director Miller has been through enough. Good thing he's not falling for it. A woman like that deserves to be left with nothing." Lydia heard the comments and wished the ground would open up and swallow her. She knew nothing she said would work now. There was only one thing left to do. She suddenly dropped to her knees. Her kneecaps hit the concrete with a thud, the pain making her wince, but she kept her head up, looking at Bode with tear-filled eyes. "Bode, I'm begging you. I can't survive like this. I haven't had a place to stay or a proper meal in days. I don't even have a change of clothes. Please just have some pity on me. Unfreeze just a little bit of money so I can live, okay? If you help me, I'll do anything." Bode looked down at Lydia kneeling on the ground, but he felt nothing, only deep, cutting contempt. He had seen her commanding a boardroom, seen her lying with a straight face, but he had never seen her like this. So pathetic, so utterly spineless. "Lydia, who are you putting on this show for?" Bode's voice was devoid of warmth. "When you were cheating, did you think about whether you could survive? When you were moving our assets, did you think about how I would react? You brought this on yourself. It has nothing to do with me." He paused, then continued, "And don't talk to me about pity. Do you deserve pity? If you did, you wouldn't have been whispering sweet nothings to David behind my back. You wouldn't have tried to give him our joint savings, and you wouldn't have let me see you two being intimate at a wedding. The only one who deserves pity here is me, the person you lied to for 5 years, the person who treated you like family." Lydia knelt on the ground, tears streaming down her face, mumbling over and over, "Bode, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Just give me one more chance. Just one." Just then, a security guard from the Sterling Tower ran over and respectfully addressed Bode. "Director Miller, are you all right? Should we remove her?" Bode nodded, his tone firm. "Get her out of here. She's disrupting the building's business. And if she ever dares to cause a scene here again, call the police immediately. You don't need to ask me first." "Yes, Director Miller." The guard acknowledged, then moved to pull Lydia up. "Ma'am, please get up and come with us. Stop harassing Director Miller." Lydia struggled, trying to grab Bode's pant leg, but the guard held her firmly. She watched Bode turn and walk into the building, shouting after him, "Bode, don't go. I know I was wrong. Just give me one more chance." But Bode never looked back, disappearing through the entrance. The guards dragged Lydia into a nearby alley and warned her, "Ma'am, don't come back here and cause trouble again, or we will call the police." Then they turned and left. After his blow-up with Lydia, David stewed at home for 2 days, getting angrier by the minute. He was convinced Lydia was just making excuses not to buy him the watch, using the frozen assets story to trick him. Then, on the 3rd day at lunch, he went with some co-workers to the Beaumont Hotel, the same place where the wedding had been. As they passed the front desk, he overheard 2 receptionists talking. "Remember that guy, David, from the wedding a few days ago? I heard his rich girlfriend, Lydia, never even paid the deposit for the reception. Seriously, that suit she was wearing looked expensive. How could she not pay the deposit? Tell me about it. Finance just told me all of Lydia's bank accounts are frozen, and even her houses were seized by the court. She's completely broke now. I bet David got played." "Broke? Bank accounts frozen? Houses seized?" The words hit David like a thunderbolt. The iced tea in his hand slipped and crashed to the floor, splashing everywhere. His coworker jumped. "David, what's wrong? Are you okay?" But David ignored him. He lunged toward the front desk, grabbing one of the receptionists by the arm, his voice trembling. What did you just say? Lydia's bank accounts are frozen? Her houses were seized? Is that true? The receptionist winced in pain. Sir, I was just chatting with my colleague. I don't know the specifics. You don't know? Your finance department knows, right? Go ask them. Go ask them now. David roared, drawing stares from other guests. His coworker quickly pulled him away, whispering, David, don't make a scene. Let's talk outside. But David wasn't listening. All he could think about was that Lydia was broke and he had been scammed. He'd gotten with Lydia because she was rich and could buy him designer brands and a house. Now that she was broke, his dream was shattered. He shook off his coworker, pulled out his phone, and dialed Lydia's number. He'd blocked her after their fight, but quickly unblocked her now. It took 3 tries before she answered, her voice weak and tired. Hello? Lydia, tell me the truth. Are your bank accounts frozen? Are your houses seized? Have you been broke this whole time? David screamed into the phone, tears welling in his eyes. Lydia was stunned that he knew. She hesitated, her tone evasive. David, who told you that? It's just a rumor. Don't believe it. A rumor? Everyone at the Beaumont is saying it. You didn't even pay the wedding deposit, and you still have the nerve to deny it? David's voice grew louder. Lydia, you lied to me. You're not some rich girl, you're just broke. You were just using me. His yelling finally got to Lydia, and her own temper flared. Yes, I'm broke. My accounts are frozen, and my houses are seized. So what? You were only with me for my money, weren't you? Now that I'm broke, you turn on me. You're no better than I am. Lydia slammed the phone down. David stood there, clutching his phone, shaking with rage. He looked around at the Beaumont Hotel. This was the place where he had dreamed of a happy future, and now it was the stage for his humiliation. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. He suddenly stormed into the center of the lobby, grabbed a water glass from a nearby table, and smashed it on the floor. Lydia, get out here, he yelled. You lied to me, you used me, and now you're hiding. If you don't come out here and give me an explanation today, I'll tell everyone about your affair and how you cheated on your husband. I'll ruin you. The guests in the lobby were all drawn to the commotion, many pulling out their phones to record. The hotel manager rushed over. Mr. David, please calm down. We can talk in my office. Please don't disturb the other guests. What office? I'm saying it right here. David shoved the manager's hand away, his voice even louder. Lydia cheated on her husband, tricked me into being with her, and lied about being rich. She couldn't even pay for a wedding deposit. She's a fraud. Don't let her fool any of you. Just then, Lydia rushed into the lobby. The hotel staff had called her, telling her David was causing a scene. Afraid of things escalating, she had to come. The moment she entered, she saw David making a spectacle of himself in the center of the lobby, surrounded by people filming him. Her face instantly turned beet red. David, stop it. Come with me. Lydia ran over and tried to pull him away, but David shoved her off, pointing a finger in her face. Lydia, you have the nerve to show your face? You're going to compensate me today. Either you give me $15,000 for my emotional distress, or you divorce Bode and give me half his assets. Otherwise, I'll come here every day and make sure you can never show your face in public again.
$15,000?
Half the assets? Lydia laughed in disbelief. I don't even have $10 right now. How am I supposed to give you $15,000? Bode and I are finished. Why would he ever give you his assets? David, stop dreaming. I don't care. David lunged at her, grabbing her clothes. You have to give me the money. If you don't, I'll go to your office, I'll go to your parents' house, and I'll make sure everyone knows what a liar you are. His grip was painful, and Lydia's anger boiled over. She shoved him back hard. Go ahead. You think I'm scared of you? I've already lost everything. What do I have to lose? If you have the guts, go make a scene. David stared at Lydia's furious expression and then at the judging eyes of the crowd. He suddenly choked up. It was only then that he realized he hadn't just been played for a fool, he had become a public laughingstock. The manager pleaded with Lydia. Ms. Miller, please, you need to get him out of here. This isn't good for anyone. Lydia looked at David, feeling a mix of anger and frustration, but she knew she had no choice. She said coldly, are you coming or not? If you don't, I'm leaving you here. David knew there was no point in continuing. He followed Lydia out of the hotel. The moment they were outside, David turned and ran off. Lydia stood there, watching his retreating back, then looked at the people still filming from the hotel entrance. She felt like her life had completely fallen apart. Caught cheating, assets frozen, houses seized, and now her lover had turned on her. She was like a stray dog with nowhere to go. After leaving the Beaumont Hotel, Lydia wandered the streets like a ghost for hours. The autumn wind whipped fallen leaves against her legs, but she was too numb to care. David's threats echoed in her ears, and with nowhere to stay, she finally decided to swallow her pride and go back to her parents' house. Her family lived in a small apartment in an older part of the city. After getting married, Lydia had rarely come back. She found the place too small and felt that living in a luxury condo with Bode gave her more status. Now, she stood downstairs, head down, looking up at the light shining from the third-floor window. After a long hesitation, she finally went up. Knock, knock, knock. Her mother's voice came from inside. Who is it? Mom. It's me, Lydia whispered, her voice barely audible. The door clicked open. Her mother was shocked to see her. Lydia, what happened to you? Why are your clothes so dirty? Your hair is a mess. Lydia walked in with her head down. Her father was on the sofa watching TV. He frowned when he saw her. Weren't you on a business trip to France? Why are you back? And looking like this? Dad, Mom, the tears finally came. Lydia collapsed onto the floor and poured everything out, the frozen assets, the seized houses, David's public meltdown. She left out the part about her affair, only saying that she and Bode had a little misunderstanding, and he had frozen all her assets in response. Her mother exploded. She slapped her thigh and shot up from the sofa. What? That boy Bode dared to do this? Does he have no respect for our family? Half of those assets are yours. What right does he have to freeze them? And you bought those houses together. How dare he get them seized? Her father put down the remote, his face grim. Bode must be seeing someone else and is trying to get rid of you. Lydia, don't panic. Tomorrow we'll go with you to find him and make him unfreeze the assets and give the houses back. If he refuses, we'll go to his office and make a scene so he can't show his face in public. A spark of hope lit up in Lydia. She nodded quickly. Dad, Mom, you're the only ones who care about me. Bode won't even talk to me right now. But if you go, it will definitely work. The next morning, Lydia's parents put on their best clothes and went with her to the Sterling Tower. When they arrived, her mother charged straight for the entrance but was stopped by the receptionist. Ma'am, do you have an appointment? An appointment for what? We're here to see Bode Miller. Tell him to get out here. Her mother shouted, hands on her hips, her voice echoing through the lobby. Bode, get out here. How dare you bully my daughter? You took all her money and her houses, and now you think you can hide? Office workers started to gather, pointing and whispering. The receptionist was sweating, quickly calling Bode's assistant. A few minutes later, Bode emerged from the elevator, dressed in a business suit, his face impassive. Bode, you finally decided to show up. His mother-in-law lunged to grab his arm, but Bode sidestepped her. Ma'am, if you have something to say, let's talk calmly. Don't get physical, Bode said, his voice quiet but firm. His father-in-law stepped forward, pointing at Lydia. Bode, look what you've done to Lydia. So she had a little disagreement with you. Did you have to freeze all her bank accounts and seize her houses? Are you trying to make her live on the street? Bode looked at Lydia, who was hiding behind her parents, her head bowed, refusing to meet his eyes. Bode let out a cold laugh. A disagreement? Sir, ma'am, do you know what this disagreement was about? He took the tablet from his bag, opened the saved chat logs and photos, and held it out for them to see. See for yourselves. Your daughter said she was going to France for work, but she was actually at a wedding with a man named David. She secretly opened a bank account and used our joint savings to buy him watches. She even told him that after we divorced, she would transfer the houses to his name. This is what she did. Do you still think I'm the one bullying her? His mother-in-law stared at the text messages, her face growing pale, but she still tried to defend Lydia. This must be fake. You photoshopped these to frame her. You can ask Lydia if it's fake, Bode said, turning the tablet toward her. Lydia, did you send these messages? Did you take these photos with David? Do you dare say no? Lydia's face turned beet red. She buried her head even lower, stammering, unable to form a coherent sentence. Seeing her reaction, her parents knew it was true. Her mother's hand started to tremble as she pointed at Lydia. How could you do something like this? How could you betray Bode? Mom, Lydia cried out. That's not the point right now. The point is Bode froze all my assets. I can't even afford to eat. That's what you deserve, Bode said coldly. You cheated during our marriage and tried to move community property. According to the law, not only can I request an asset freeze, but I can also ask the court to give you a smaller share or even none of the assets in the divorce. The fact that I haven't left you with absolutely nothing is me being generous. He paused and looked at her parents. Sir, ma'am, I know you love your daughter, but you have to be reasonable. Lydia is the one who was in the wrong. I will not unfreeze the assets, and I will not unseal the houses. I will be filing for divorce and we will let the court decide. If you want to make a scene, be my guest, but in the end, the only person who will be humiliated is Lydia, and by extension, your family. People in the crowd were nodding in agreement. Someone whispered, the director is right. His wife was the one who cheated. These parents are just enabling her, even when she's clearly in the wrong. Lydia's parents' faces turned from red to white. Utterly humiliated, they grabbed Lydia and stormed out. As they reached the lobby doors, her mother turned and shot Bode a glare. Bode, you just wait. This isn't over. Bode ignored them and walked back to his office. Sitting back in his chair, he took a sip of water. His in-law's outburst hadn't rattled him, it had only strengthened his resolve to divorce. He took out his phone and sent a text to Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, please prepare the divorce petition as soon as possible. I want to get this to court quickly. Meanwhile, Lydia was dragged out of the building by her parents. Once they were outside, her father glared at her. You are such a disappointment. You destroyed a perfectly good family. Now look at you. Bode is divorcing you, and you're going to end up with nothing. Lydia covered her face, the tears streaming down again. Lydia slunk back to her parents' old apartment with them. The moment they were inside, her mother sat on the sofa and started crying, while her father crouched by the door, chain smoking. No one spoke to her. She huddled in a corner and pulled out her phone to message David, only to find that he had blocked her long ago. After their fight at the Beaumont, David had not only blocked her on all her messaging apps but had also deleted her number. Undeterred, she borrowed her mother's phone and sent David a text from an unknown number. David, it's Lydia. I know I was wrong. Can we talk? I have a way to get money, and I'll split it with you. She knew David was greedy. Money was the only bait that would work. Less than 10 minutes later, he replied, Fine, we can talk. You picked the place. No tricks. Lydia quickly texted back. The gazebo in Central Park at 3 p.m. She was afraid he would cause another public scene, so she chose a secluded spot. At 2:30 p.m., Lydia arrived at the gazebo, clutching the $50 her mother had given her. She was wearing an old jacket and faded pants, a shadow of her former self. At exactly 3 p.m., David showed up. He was dressed in a designer jacket and recoiled when he saw Lydia's shabby appearance. What are you wearing? Didn't you say you had a way to get money? Where is it? Lydia quickly pulled him down to sit, her voice low. David, be patient. I have a plan. Bode is divorcing me, right? If you help me by telling the court that Bode cheated first and that I was driven to it, then the judge will have to give me a fair share of the assets. I'll get the money, and I'll give you $30,000. How does that sound? David sneered. Do you think I'm an idiot? Bode has proof that you cheated. What am I supposed to tell the court? Besides, $30,000? Lydia, if you don't come up with the 15,000 you owe me for my emotional distress, we're not done. 15,000? I can't even afford to eat right now. How am I supposed to give you that kind of money? Lydia pleaded. David, can't you just be a little understanding? Once I get the settlement, I promise I'll give you more. Understand you? Who's understanding me? David jumped to his feet, jabbing a finger in her face. I was with you for 6 months, didn't get a dime from you, and got completely played. Now you want me to help you commit perjury? No way. If you don't have the money today, I'm going to your office and making sure you lose your job. The threat of going to her office panicked Lydia. She had just started a new job last month. If her colleagues found out she was a cheater and a fraud, she'd be fired on the spot. She quickly grabbed David. David, don't go to my office. I'll write you an IOU, okay? I owe you 15,000. As soon as I have money, I'll pay you back with interest. David hesitated. An IOU was better than nothing. Fine. Write it now. Make it clear that it has to be paid back within a year, or I'm taking you to court. Lydia quickly found a pen and paper in her bag and scribbled out the IOU on the stone table. Just as she was about to hand it to him, an idea struck her. David, you have to do me a favor first. Come with me to Bode's office. Tell him you're my brother and you want to talk to him about the divorce. Get him to soften his stance. Otherwise, even with this IOU, I'll never have the money to pay you back. David thought it over and decided it made sense. Fine, I'll go with you. But if you're playing me again, I swear I'll make you pay. They took a taxi to the Sterling Tower. When they arrived, Lydia told David to go up by himself while she waited downstairs. She was afraid Bode would cause another scene if he saw her. David walked straight into the building. When the receptionist asked if he had an appointment, he lied. I'm Lydia's brother. I'm here to talk to Bode Miller about the divorce. He's expecting me. The receptionist was skeptical but called Bode's assistant. After the assistant relayed the message, Bode said, "Let him come up. I'm curious to see what game Lydia is playing now." David entered Bode's office and saw him sitting behind a large desk, exuding an air of confidence. David felt a flicker of intimidation but pushed through it. Bode, I'm Lydia's brother. My sister knows she was wrong. I was hoping you could talk things out with her instead of making things so ugly. Just give her a fair share so she can get by. She's really struggling. Bode looked up, a cold smile on his lips. You're Lydia's brother? I wasn't aware she had one. Besides, whether your sister is struggling or not has nothing to do with me. She cheated, tried to transfer assets, and is now facing the consequences she earned. David's face turned red. Bode, I know she was wrong, but she's learned her lesson. Just give her a chance. A chance? Bode interrupted, pulling the tablet from his drawer and opening their chat history. I have all of your conversations with Lydia right here. You say you're her brother? I think you mean her lover. David, did you really think you could come here with her and scam me out of money? I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. David's face went white. He never imagined Bode knew his name and had saved their chats. He turned to run, but Bode stopped him. Wait, that IOU in your pocket, Lydia wrote it, didn't she? David instinctively touched his pocket. Bode continued, she owes you 15,000. My advice? Take her to court immediately. Otherwise, when she can't even afford to eat, that IOU will be a worthless piece of paper. And let me remind you, Lydia has no job and no assets. Even if you win the lawsuit, you won't see a dime. David stood frozen, his mind blank. He finally understood that Lydia had played him again. She never intended to pay him back, she was just using him to try and manipulate Bode. Shaking with rage, he stormed out of the office. When he got downstairs and saw Lydia waiting for him, he walked up and slapped her across the face. Lydia, you lied to me again. I'm not done with you. Lydia was stunned. Before she could react, David had run off. She held her stinging cheek, watching his retreating back, a mix of anger and regret washing over her. She hadn't gotten any money, and now she had made another enemy. Back in the office, Bode stood by the window and sent a text to Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, David just came to my office. He has an IOU written by Lydia. Does that count as her debt? Will it affect the property division in the divorce? A few moments later, Mr. Lee replied, "It does not count as community debt. It is Lydia's personal debt and has nothing to do with you. It will not affect the property division. Rest assured, we have more than enough evidence for the upcoming lawsuit. We have a very high chance of winning." On the day of the divorce hearing, Bode arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. Mr. Lee was already waiting for him at the entrance, holding a binder of evidence. "Mr. Miller, everything is prepared. We have the chat logs and photos of Lydia's affair, the bank records of her transferring assets, and the IOU she wrote to David. It's more than enough to prove she is the at-fault party. We will win this." Bode nodded and took the binder, flipping through a few pages. Each one was a clear record of Lydia's betrayal, from the screenshot of her fake flight itinerary to France, to the transfer records for David's rent, to the intimate photos from the wedding. Everything was meticulously organized. He took a deep breath, calming the last vestiges of turmoil in his heart. This wasn't about revenge. It was about getting closure for 5 years of his life. A short while later, Lydia arrived. She was wearing an ill-fitting old suit, her hair a mess, and her parents followed behind her, their faces grim. When she saw Bode, her eyes darted away, but she still forced herself to approach him. "Bode, can we please talk in private? Let's not do this in court." Bode ignored her and followed Mr. Lee into the courtroom. The gavel sounded, the judge took his seat, and the hearing began. Mr. Lee started by presenting their case. The plaintiff, Bode Miller, requests a dissolution of marriage from the defendant, Lydia Miller, on the grounds that the defendant engaged in adultery and attempted to transfer community property, thereby seriously infringing upon the plaintiff's legal rights. Furthermore, the plaintiff asserts that as the at-fault party, the defendant should receive a smaller share or no share of the community property. The two properties and all savings should be awarded to the plaintiff. The defendant's personal debt of $15,000 to David is her sole responsibility. The moment Lydia heard smaller share or no share, she shot up. "Your Honor, I did not cheat. Those photos were photoshopped, and David forced me to write those messages. And the assets are joint property. I'm entitled to half." Mr. Lee immediately presented the binder of evidence, displaying it page by page for the judge and jury. "Your Honor, if you would please review this notarized record of the defendant's text messages with David, spanning 6 months and detailing their affair and plans to transfer assets. Here is a security camera still from the Beaumont Hotel wedding, where the defendant is seen acting intimately with the best man. And here are the bank statements from the defendant's secret Bank of America account, showing a $20,000 bonus being used to purchase gifts for David, which constitutes a transfer of community property. Every piece of evidence was officially certified. Lydia's face grew paler and paler. When it was her turn to speak, her mother tried to cause a scene. "Your Honor, Bode is the one trying to frame her. He must have been cheating on her and is just trying to kick my daughter out." The judge banged his gavel. "The defendant's family will maintain order. You may not make unsubstantiated accusations. Does the plaintiff have any additional evidence?" Bode stood up, his voice calm. "Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence. The defendant attempted to mortgage our Riverside Gardens condo, but the plaintiff discovered this and stopped it, which a witness from property management can confirm. Furthermore, throughout our marriage, the defendant consistently hid her financial status from me and even reported the supplementary credit card I gave her as lost, proving her premeditated intent to transfer assets." Lydia's confidence completely evaporated. She slumped into her seat, mumbling, "I didn't mean to. It was just a moment of weakness." The hearing continued into the afternoon. The judge announced a 30-minute recess before delivering the verdict. When everyone returned to the courtroom, Lydia's hands were shaking. Her mother was still whispering prayers that they would at least get one of the houses. The judge picked up the verdict, his voice clear and strong. After reviewing the evidence, this court finds that the defendant, Lydia Miller, engaged in an extramarital affair with a third party, David, and attempted to transfer community property during the marriage. The facts are clear, and the evidence is sufficient. In accordance with the Civil Code, the court rules as follows. 1. The divorce between the plaintiff, Bode Miller, and the defendant, Lydia Miller, is granted. 2. All community property, including the Riverside Gardens condo, the Aspen Hills villa, and all savings, is awarded to the plaintiff, Bode Miller. 3. The defendant's personal debt of $15,000 to David is her sole responsibility. 4. All court fees are to be paid by the defendant, Lydia Miller. With a final bang of the gavel, the judgment was final. Lydia was stunned for a few seconds, then lunged toward Bode. "Why? I own half of that property. You can't just destroy me like this." A bailiff quickly intercepted her. Her father, furious, slapped her across the face. "You are such a disgrace. Are you happy now? No home, no money, you've ruined your life." Her mother collapsed onto the floor, wailing, "Why is my life so miserable?" The courtroom descended into chaos. Bode didn't look back. He followed Mr. Lee out of the courtroom. The sun was shining outside, and a cool autumn breeze washed over his face. He finally felt a sense of relief. After all this time, it was finally over. Mr. Lee smiled. "Mr. Miller, congratulations. Not only is the divorce finalized, but you've also secured all your assets. If Lydia tries to harass you in the future, we can file for a restraining order." Bode nodded and took out his phone to text his best friend. "Jax, it's over. I won." A reply came back almost instantly. "That's amazing. Dinner's on me tonight. We're celebrating your new life." He looked up at the distant skyscrapers, a long-lost smile finally returning to his face. The past 5 years had been a nightmare. Now he was finally awake. He could finally shed the weight and do the things he wanted to do. The promotion he'd put on hold, the trips he'd wanted to take, the oil painting classes he'd always been curious about, he could put them all back on his agenda. Back in the courtroom, Lydia was escorted out by the bailiffs. She stood at the courthouse entrance, watching her parents' disappointed backs as they walked away. She thought about David demanding his money with the IOU, about the job she had lost, and she crumpled to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Bode moved back into the newly renovated Riverside Gardens condo. The floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room were now dressed with fresh white sheer curtains, letting the sunlight pour in and fall on the light gray sofa. On the coffee table sat one of his new oil paintings, a vibrant sunflower in full bloom. "Bode, this place looks incredible. You've got great taste," Jack said, hugging a throw pillow on the sofa, a freshly opened bottle of red wine in his hand. "You said you wanted to redo this place to make it your own, but I was worried you wouldn't be able to move on." "Looks like I was worried for nothing." Bode smiled and poured him a glass of wine. "I moved on a long time ago. That whole ordeal was awful, but it taught me that you have to rely on yourself. By the way, I was promoted to department director last month. The pay raise was pretty significant. We can go traveling more often now." "Seriously? That's awesome." Jax gave him an excited hug. "I knew you could do it, unlike some people who are still stuck in the mud." The some people Jax was referring to was Lydia. After the divorce, Lydia became a social pariah. When she looked for work, companies would do a background check and find out about her affair and attempts to transfer assets. No one would even hire her for an entry-level position. Eventually, she had no choice but to take odd jobs at a construction site. She lived in a dark, damp basement apartment that cost $300 a month, a place so humid mold grew on the walls. To make matters worse, David took her to court over the IOU. The court ordered Lydia to repay the $15,000 within 10 days, but she could barely afford food, let alone that kind of money. She ended up on a list of delinquent debtors, which restricted her from any high-end spending, including taking trains or staying in hotels. Her parents couldn't handle the downfall and yelled at her every day. Her father wanted nothing to do with her, and she and her mother fought every time they saw each other. One day, Lydia injured her leg at the construction site and asked her parents to take her to the hospital. Her mother's only response was, "You made your bed. Now lie in it. Don't bother us." That night, Lydia limped down the street and saw a commercial playing on a massive screen in a shopping plaza. It was an interview with Bode, the new director at his company. He was dressed in a sharp suit, speaking with confidence and poise, his eyes shining with ambition. She stood there watching for a long time, the tears finally falling. She remembered how Bode used to leave a light on for her when she worked late, how he would cook her stomach-soothing porridge, how he had supported every decision she ever made. And what did she do? She took his kindness for granted and threw his trust away. She finally understood now that what she had lost was a happiness she would never find again. David's life hadn't turned out much better. After suing Lydia, he didn't get a single cent. His public outburst at the Beaumont Hotel became office gossip, and when he tried to find a new job, he couldn't give a good reason for leaving his previous company. He ended up taking an administrative job at a small firm for half his previous salary. One day, he ran into Bode at the supermarket. Bode was picking out fruit with Jax. David instinctively tried to hide, but Bode saw him. "Mr. David, long time no see," Bode said, his tone calm, without a hint of hostility. David managed an awkward smile. "Bode, long time no see. You're doing well." "Not bad," Bode said, picking up an apple. "I hope you can find your own path soon and stop dwelling on the past." With that, Bode and Jax walked away. David watched his back, a complicated mix of feelings churning inside him. If he hadn't been so greedy for Lydia's money, if he hadn't tried to take a shortcut, would his life be different now? But there were no what-ifs. Time flew by, and soon it was the end of the year. Bode took his parents on a trip to Florida. Lying on a beach chair, looking out at the azure ocean, he felt a sense of profound peace. He took out his phone, deleted the last photo he had of himself with Lydia, and then opened his social feed. He posted a picture of the sunset over the ocean with the caption, "A new beginning. All is well."